guys have everything the way you need it in place to do things. And when we get to the point where you're ready to start turning in drafts, one of the things I'm going to tell you is this: if you send me the draft, I'll read the draft and I'll send you an email right back with things I've noticed. Okay? Because I think one of the things that's real important to you all is that you get feedback before you submit it. Because even though this one necessarily is being scored by someone at UMO, um, the point is that task number one, the information finds its way all the way through all four of the tasks. Okay, and that's why you need to get task one tight so that it's ready to be used. Yes, Bethany.
I'm confused on something. So when we were going through the classes, it looked like we weren't writing a paper, we were writing things to go with each artifact. So
Uh-huh.
now it sounds like we're writing a 7-page paper in addition.
No, 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 no. When you see it, when you pull it up, you'll have boxes, okay?
And you're just filling those out.
And you fill in the boxes. You write in the boxes. Feasibly, you could bullet it, okay? But you don't. I would suggest not bulleting it. I would suggest explaining yourself as you're going through.
Okay.
You know, just but feasibly, you could bullet it if you were that good of a technical writer. You know, I think you could bullet it and pull it off. But the thing is one of the things that I would just say this, and I'm going to go back to the language thing. Write this thing so that anybody, if you know, if you were, and I'll just say this, if you were teaching fifth grade, could you fifth graders read it and understand it? Okay. And I know that sounds weird, but one of the things that I will tell you about most writing you do professionally, whether it's in education or in other fields, is contingent upon can anybody sit down and be able to understand what you wrote. Okay. And you know that's why you know we're offering you all the support we can offer you with editing and revising and things like that. Okay. Now that being said, I just I will just say this. Um, when we look at the last parts of this, and there's not as many things to look at real quick that we're going to do. As a matter of fact, we only have like you know probably 3 or 4 pages to cover in this thing, and we'll be wrapped up for the day. But one of the things I'll tell you is in the third text box, when you're dealing with text box 1.1.3, you're dealing with norms, protocols, and agreements. Okay. And of course, that's dealing with primarily what are your classroom policies, what are your classroom performance things. Like when you look at that in A, B, and C, you know, give an example of one classroom norm that enhances student learning or impacts the environment, facilitates instruction. The other one's give an example of a technology norm. Okay, let's look at the first one here for a minute. If you had a classroom norm that impacts learning, okay, very simple. Let's say we are going back to PBIS. Let's use PBIS for those of you who are elementary and middle people. Y'all should be right in there with PBIS. You know, positive behavioral instructional support, PBIS. All right. First thing you're looking at is, let's say your 3 areas are be responsible, be respectful, be safe. Those are the common 3 that show up with PBIS all the time. Okay, so we have one classroom norm, safe. Okay, let's say we're going to use safety. In our classroom norms, we sit at our desks with our seats, all 4 of our chair legs on the floor and underneath. That's a safety expectation for sitting in class during instruction, right? Or we keep our hands and feet to ourselves. Okay, if I'm in a kindergarten class, that means I'm not sitting there with my legs all hanging out of the side of the desk tripping people when they're walking by. Okay, all right, very basic thing that, you know, it's an example of a classroom norm. Now a technology norm, let's talk about technology norms here for a minute. All right, we're all using digital stuff. We may be using tablets, we may be using Chromebooks, we may be using MacBooks, we may be using a number of things. We may be using you know, whiteboards, you know, Promethean boards, whatever. We may be using a lot of things here. A technology norm would be this. Let's just say if I'm teaching middle school, say I'm teaching 7th grade. All right, And I have all those little kids who, as soon as you put a computer in front of them, what's the first thing they're doing? If they, let's think about middle school here for a minute. What are they
Playing.
doing the first time when you put the computer in front of them? What's the first thing they're trying to do?
Turn it on and play with it.
They're trying to
use it.
turn it on and play with it. They're trying to go to web pages that
YouTube.
they don't need to go to. They
YouTube,
want to
yep,
watch
that's right.
Roblox or whatever it happens to be. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and the girls
TikTok.
across the street showed her the dances on the on all the TikTok stuff this summer. And and I do tend to agree with one of the statements I saw on Facebook the other night. Said if you can learn 50 TikTok dances, you can certainly learn your math. And so anyway, but the thing is, something like that, a technology norm that enhances the learning environment or impacts it or facilitates instruction might be that from the time the devices go on, you are only going to the sites that have been clearly outlined by the instructor. For example, if we're in elementary school and you're doing silent sustained reading, you can only go to Epic, okay? Or you can only go to Storyline Online. That would be a technology rules that you can only go to the sites that you are instructed to go to in the classroom setting, okay? Or, for example, if you're using audio, you must wear your headphones, okay? Those are basic technology norms, okay? And then the third one that you look at are things that you and the kids could agree together. How many of you guys sit down and create a classroom constitution with your kids on the first day of school? Most of the time. You sit down and you say, okay, we're going to create the 3 rules by which we're going to run our classroom this year. Anybody do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's an agreement. That's a protocol or a norm or an agreement that you do with your students. So you think about it. You show one that, that's a classroom, that's a non-negotiable. You show one that's a technology-based one that impacts student learning. And then you show one that you and your kids created together, okay? Real simple. Once again, raise the roof. We got this. We can do this. We're already doing it. We've already done it this week and last week. Yes, Angelique.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
First, about like the classroom norm. I have something where it's on a chart and it's an I don't know chart. So it's almost like Jeopardy. If I come to you with a question, you can ask for more time. You can ask for help from a friend. The only thing that you can't do is say, I don't know. So could I use that as a classroom norm?
Yeah, kind of. I know there was one elementary teacher I used to work with, and she used to have what she called C3 before me.
Okay.
And some of y'all do C3 before me, where you either go look it up, you ask somebody for help, you go back to the example, whatever. The idea of C3 before me is a prime example of that. So if you're doing something like that already, that's something you can use, Angelique.
Okay. And for the technology one, because I have high school students, they will be on the correct website, but they will have like YouTube or something else running in the background. So they know that. And I walk around, because I don't trust them, because I have my own children, so I know how they do. So when I do walk around and I see it, and they'll try to click it, and I pull the screen back up, they know that they lose their privileges because they were not following the rules. So they know that. So
that's an expectation. That's a technological expectation that you have, that you must be doing the work that we have assigned at the present. And like, for example, what you were talking about with YouTube. Look, I've had kids where they would they'd have their headphones on because they were doing something that involved audio, but the audio with the activity was not the audio they were listening to,
Right.
you know, and, you know, and like I said, you know, some of the stuff they were listening to, good Lord, you know, you wonder. But that being said, you know, that's just one of those things that that's one of those things that you might have on there, is that privileges are contingent upon proper compliance with with the rules related to that activity. I mean, that's certainly, that's a technological thing, because if you're doing say ninth grade physical science, and you're talking about properties of matter, and they've pulled up YouTube and they're watching extreme skateboarding or something, then, you know, they're learning some stuff about matter. They're just not learning the stuff about matter that you want them to learn. So, you know, those kinds of things you have to look at. Now, one of the other things that I'll point out here is when we move to text box, we moved to text box 1 point, or to step 2 with text box 121. One of the things that's kind of interesting is, once again, you're going back to your getting to know your students activity, and you take one example of the information you might use in your getting to know your students activity, and analyze how that information could influence whole class instruction. Like, for example, you know, if you do a getting to know you activity, and half of the students in your classroom tell you that they have to ride a bus and get on the bus before the sun comes up, they get on the bus at 5:45 in the morning, how are you going to use that to impact your instruction? You might say, okay, well, because of the fact that I know these kids are on the bus a long time, I might give them more time on the up front to unwind and get together with what they have to do, before I try to give them really involved instruction. Or you might say, well, I give everybody a 10-minute decompression time when they get off the bus to get their chattering out, or whatever it happens to be. You know, those kinds of things you might use. That's information you get out of the get to know you thing. Or say you do a getting to know you thing, and let's just say a bunch of your students tell you that their parents work late at night. Okay, and they come home late, and sometimes they don't see them before they go to bed. Now, sometimes students aren't going to tell you that. Sometimes they will. Little kids are going to come closer to telling you stuff than big kids will. Middle school and high school kids ain't going to tell you much, but little kids will tell you stuff. Little kids will share every secret at the house. I mean, you know, even the stuff that's not necessarily harmful, but you know, but you know, the point is they'll share everything. And the reason why I say that is, you know, in that getting to know you activity, you might look for a trend. Like, for example, do you have a lot of kids who say their dads are military and they're deployed? Or do you have a lot of kids whose parents might work in the same place? Sometimes you'll find that out. Like, for example, and I'm not picking on anybody in any particular county, but let's say, is anybody in here from Sampson County? Anybody in here from Duplin County? Okay. All right. Well, okay, let's just say this. In Duplin County, you know, you have a lot of agriculture. And if I'm not mistaken, don't y'all have a pretty large butterball plant there, for butterball turkeys?
Yes, and House of Right Church.
Okay. If you had 10 of your kids in class who said, well, my dad works at Butterball, or my mom works at Butterball. Okay. Well, that may impact your instructional activities, particularly if they're on third shift in the middle of the night, or if they're on second shift from 3 to 11. That's why you have to look at that stuff and think about that. That's what I'm saying, is you might find stuff like that out in your getting to know you things. Now, one of the things that might be funny, might be interesting in this 1.21 thing, is that using the same thing, you might pick out a kid, for example, in the B section, using one student's completed getting to know your students activity, analyze how this information would influence an instructional decision you would make with this one student. Okay. for example, let's just say we have a child who has an IEP for behavior, and we know mama works. We know mama works second shift at Butterball. And so mom comes home late. Kid lives with grandma. Grandma comes over till mom gets off work and puts the kid to bed and what have you and stuff. Okay, that might influence the kid's behavior, particularly if the child's staying up late to see mom when she comes home from work. Okay, and when that happens, you have behaviors the next day. So what might you do? I knew this principal who used to keep a little blanket in his office for a particular kid who had that situation happen, and kid would come in for 30 minutes as soon as he got off the bus, go in the office and lay down on the principal's couch, put a little blanket over him, and he'd take a little 30-minute nap before he even went to class, and that helped resolve some behavior issues. You might do something like that. I'm just giving you examples of what you could do in the 1.21. Now, the thing about knowledge of your students, that's the one thing you want to do, particularly in this part of this thing, is make sure that you're understanding your students, you're understanding where they come from, you're understanding the demographics that you're teaching in. And like, for example, when you're understanding your students, when you get over to the text box 1.22, that's where you're choosing your two students. Remember, we've talked about the two focus students over and over from time to time. That's where you're choosing those two students, okay? And I would just say this. Now, I can't tell you who to pick because I don't know your classrooms, but if it were me, I would try to pick maybe a child who doesn't have any learning issues, and then I would try to pick a child who maybe has an exceptionality so that you can show the breadth of your skill, okay? And what I mean by that is, let's just say you have you're teaching fourth grade, and, you have a kid who is very, very bright, who, usually gets done early and is bored. That's the kid you're going to need to do extension and enrichment with, okay? And that's going to give you the chance to show differentiation and individualization for that kid, okay, to move them forward faster. Then you might have a kid with a disability, and I would suggest pick a kid with a disability where you have to differentiate and you have to provide supports for that child, okay? Because one of the things that happens is that if you look for each student on 1.22, you pick one possible instructional strategy and one learning activity. Does that sound familiar? Like what we did in the first half? One instructional strategy, one learning activity. For student number 2, one instructional strategy and one learning activity. So, that being said, you have ideas, and this is one of the things I always like about what we do. If we're serious about what we're doing, what each kid in your classroom, by the time you get to about 3 or 4 weeks into the semester, what each kid in your classroom is strong at doing and what they need support with and how you support them. That. This is not stuff you don't already know, okay? And that's the one thing I will tell you. Use what you know to do this. That's the point. Now, as far as things are concerned, Angelique, I'm going to go back to your question here. I just pulled your question up. Play in the 1.21 box, students working. I provide time for some of them to nap for about 30 minutes. I provide food because they might come from all night, working all night in class. That may, particularly if you're providing supports like that, if they're coming to school sick, or not sick, but hungry, and you give them a morning snack to help them focus, you could certainly put that in there. That would be okay. Okay. That would be fine. Because you got to remember, one of the things that we're looking at now, and I'll just say this, I had this discussion with my mother. She's 81. She's a retired high school history teacher. And we have this discussion all the time. And she says, I just don't understand why y'all do all the things y'all do. And I said, well, look, let me just explain it. When we were growing up, everybody had 2 parents at home. You ate dinner at 6 o'clock. You turned the TV off at 8 o'clock. You went to bed at 8:30 or 9 o'clock if you'd been good. You got up, somebody took care of you, someone made sure you got your homework done, that you had a bath. I said, there are a lot of these kids who don't have all that stuff being done at all. So someone has to do it, you know. It's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like we say, you know, the fields are ripe into the harvest and the laborers are few. And unfortunately, there are fewer and fewer of us. So we have to pick up the slack and do some things that we wouldn't necessarily do in another time. But, you know, we all feel better because we do it. So don't take that as a shortcoming. Now, the last text box in task 1 we're going to look at real quick, and that's communicating with your parents' families in activity 3. And for example, this is simple stuff. You just explain how your communication conveys the importance of cultivating relationships with your students and their families. Okay, when you write that first letter home, or you make that first phone call home, or you make the home visit, if your school still does home visits for elementary school or preschool, you know, you can make that case because you know how that's going to impact what goes on with your kids. Um, you know, you're also going to explain how that method of interaction fosters interaction among you, your students, and their families. And, you know, use examples. Like, for example, if you make home visits, and one of the things you do is, I think this was something that was mentioned, Latanya, when we were doing your site visit on Thursday, was that, you know, making the home visit and just sitting in the yard with the child and playing a game before before school started, just so that the parent and the child would get to know the teacher and the intern. That's, you know, what's the rationale? The rationale is to build that relationship so that that child feels like they can rely on those individuals, and that feels like those people are gonna help them and see what needs to be done to help them. Um, now, also, the overall response you receive from your communication. I mean, what do the parents say back to you when you send that letter home, or when you made that first phone call home this year, or you sent that first activity? What was the response from the kids, or what was the response from the parents? You know, that's where you kind of gauge the feedback. Okay. Now, that being said, what we're doing, how many of you, the stuff we've talked about, how many of you have looked at it and said, I don't have a clue what it is that we've done since we walked into school 2 weeks ago? Is anybody?
I do have a question about that.
Okay.
I mean, because how we've been preparing through our classes all year, the plan is completely different now because we're going through COVID.
Uh-huh.
So even with how the parents are responding, it's different now, especially for us who are teaching remotely, because we're now in constant contact with them daily.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I think that's where I'm trying to find out how to blend it in together, just because we're having, every district have different protocols.
Okay. Jasmine, what's the difference from August of this year from August of last year? How much contact did you have with your parents last year versus this year?
Well, I became a beginning teacher in January.
Okay.
And I was barely in the classroom like 2 months before this happened.
Okay.
So I missed the whole beginning year of last year.
Okay.
So, but now it's like we have to, like, I always jogged in their folders, their homework folders. That was a daily thing.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're having to contact them daily as far as technical support, how to figure out the apps, contacting 20% of your class a day. It's a lot of back and forth, day and night. So I'm just kind of confused on that.
Well, and you might be able to point that out from the time you started in the classroom till now, and use the current situation now, because you think about it, you're probably in the first 2 weeks of school, you've had more contact with your parents than most people had in an entire school year.
Right.
And I mean, William, I saw you popped up Zoom meetings. How many of y'all are doing Zoom meetings with your parents at least once a week? Okay. Well, even if you're doing telephone interactions, okay, one of the things I tell people all the time is log your phone calls. Keep a little call log, jot down a few brief notes about the phone calls and whatever. But with the Zoom meetings, let me ask you a question. When you are doing a Zoom meeting with your kids' parents, how many of you are looking at the way their faces look?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am.
And that's one of the things I would suggest is particularly, what's the reception? If they're acting happy to chat with you, or they're acting, oh man, it's that teacher again. We got to get on that computer. And gosh, I wish they'd leave us alone. Dinner's burning and I ain't got time for this mess. Well, or are they, are you able to read you're able to read their expressions? I love Zoom for one reason, because, I'll just tell you two things I love about Zoom ever since we've been doing Zoom. Number one, I kind of get an idea about, about kind of like, when doctors used to make home visits, you'd find out things about the patient, that were causing them to be healthy or causing them to be unhealthy, because you actually got to see. I find out a lot about about people because of the fact that you guys are all, tuning in from home. If you got children, your children somewhere along the line, your children are going to run through the middle of the Zoom session. Mine does every time I do a Zoom session. Most of the time, she sticks her head. And those of you who've had class with me, you've seen her stick her head up over my shoulder and look in and say hi, and then run off. Well, and the thing is, that's one of those things that happens, is that you get to see a little bit about the people behind the face, but the other part of it is this, when you talk about Zoom, it's the next best thing to be in there, because you get to see them. It's not just a voice on the other end of the line. Now, for those of you who were doing Google Hangout, I had something pop up on Google Hangout, and I'm going to cover that in just a second. Some of you all are having to record things because of access time with people, getting things. Okay. In that situation, you may not be face to face with them all at once live, but the other part of it is that you're still getting some feedback, because I'm sure that the parents are sending you a text or a message saying, we didn't quite get this. Can you help us with that? And I'm just going to say this, we were talking about blessings and curses from this thing. The curse is, we're all having to use technology that we didn't maybe know how to use when we started. The blessing is this, is that we are now able to have dialogue we weren't having 10 years ago with our parents. They'd say it's happening over at school. We don't know what's going on. Now they're saying it's happening over at school. Yeah, we'll find out at 5 o'clock when they hop on here to do this Zoom. We'll find out. Yeah. Junior might lose his car. Yes, William.
So something that's kind of been on my mind about this whole deal, the artifacts. So like the library of artifacts that we're going to be using. I'm wondering, can I put like a URL for, like, say my teaching page, the website that we had to build or whatever, that was like our first contact with our parents, and then could I use like recorded Zoom video of possible conversations that I've been having with parents or possible students, like for remedial purposes?
Okay. My suggestion about the URL is this: take a screenshot of your page and put it on a Word document and upload it. That's what I do with the URL. Now, the Zoom thing, and I would just suggest this just because, the Zoom thing, if you're using that with parents, that's fine, but you got to get their permission.
Okay.
It's the same way with children. As a matter of fact, I sent you all out a permission form. Did you get it in the email? I sent a big stack of things out. Student parent permission form for the PPAT. I sent a bunch of stuff out this week. That's the reason why I was asking.
All right.
I haven't checked yet, but I'll look.
I tell you what I'll do. I'll send it out again today when we wrap, okay?
I did receive it, Paul.
Okay. Well,
Thank
I'll
you.
send it out again because we're finding out that things aren't necessarily getting to everybody. So I'll send it all out, okay? Okay. Billy, are you okay?
Yeah, I was just going back, and yeah, I found your email, so I do see it.
I'll like I said, to be safe, I'll send it again. Y'all probably gonna get tired of me sending that stuff over and over again, but I'd rather annoy you by sending it multiple times and know you have it than not send it but once and half of you miss it. Okay. So that being said, I'll send it again. And
Can
I'll
I
put
add something, Mr. Gainey?
yes.
Uh, as a upcoming educator, I want you guys to be careful with Zoom. In our district, we are not allowed to Zoom with children anymore because those are, creeps out there creeping in on Zoom meetings and everything. We are only allowed to use Google Meet, but our Google Meet isn't up yet due to lack of devices in our county. But just be careful when you're in Zoom with a parent on just like contact or whatever, and not with the child being in the background because we're getting kind of, that and about our district. I'm not sure about everybody else's, but y'all be careful with that type of stuff.
I know that's the case down in Carteret County right now. Is that they're kind of telling you not to get crazy about doing Zoom. So if you're using another platform that is approved by your district, use the platform approved by your district. Just make it simple for yourself. Okay.
County the same way.
And
we're not using Zoom because it was hacked.
And one of the things that's kind of funny, I did Zoom Monday afternoon or Tuesday afternoon with the residency people who were getting ready to do this thing today, and we had someone slip in on that because I couldn't figure out who that person was, and I kept looking through the Mount Olive directory and I couldn't find them. So there was someone who did hop in on that one, but we got it shut down so they wouldn't slip in again. But needless to say, sometimes there are people who are just kind of trolling and they find a way in. So just, like I said, we'll do our best to take care of things. But one of the things I will tell you, the biggest issue we're probably going to have when we get down to task number 4, and let's just take a second to talk about that because we're about to wrap up. Task number.
Can I ask a quick question before you jump to task?
Okay, 4? Janetta.
I work in Duplin along with Jasmine, and she just brought up a very valid point in the chat that for Duplin County, we're not allowed to record our Google Meets with our parents. That's the only platform we can use. So for my artifact for 1.2.2, where it's asking the possible instructional strategy and the learning activity, where in my mind, I was thinking, okay, I could do a one-on-one, get the parents to sign out the permission forms. I could do the one-on-one and maybe record that and use that for an artifact. I forgot that we're not allowed to record. So what would I put there?
Well, one thing you could do is you could do a phone log sheet that you use with a parent when you make a phone call. For example, where, it might have parent contacted, issue discussed, resolution, date for implementation if something has to be implemented or something like that. You could do something like that and that should be okay. You could do that where it's clearly just a matter of you filling in the blanks and writing stuff so you don't have a recording or a visual face or anything like that.
And I can do the same with the strategy for the focus students as well?
You could, yes.
Thank you.
All right. Like I said, we're going to work our way through this. Matter of fact, your county, I know we're having some dialogue right now with with your folks at the district level regarding that because that issue has come up on more than one occasion. Okay. So just bear with us. Hopefully we'll have some resolution for you on that. Okay, Jasmine, what was that again?
Yes, as far as artifacts, if we're using Class Dojo or Google Classroom, could that, we can just screenshot that and that could be
You certainly can use Class Dojo. Like do you send a teacher's note home on Class Dojo to your parents?
Yes.
Okay. If you want to do a screenshot of Class Dojo, you can certainly do that. And also that also gives an avenue for parent dialogue too, where the parent can type back in a message. So, and plus it gives multiple platforms. It can come to the computer, it can come to the telephone, so that'll be fine. You can do something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. But let's just talk about task number 4, because task number 4, when we have to do the video recording, I'm just going to say this. Okay. We're going to do our best to figure out a way with ETS to get you all through this just on the chance we have to do digital. Okay. Now, I do know that some folks in the spring did do a digital lesson, and it went okay and they actually passed. So just bear with us till we have some clarification from ETS about task 4. We got a while because that's not due till November 11th. Right now, let's get task number 1 tight. Now, we will not do it. We'll do another Zoom session in the week prior to October 10th. But then we'll do October 10th. We're actually going to do that one on the site because we got all that squared away to do for task 2 and 3 on the site. So we'll actually come ready to write on that one. But the one thing I just want to tell you is this: for every mother's son and daughter sitting in here right now, when you get your draft ready, if you'll send me your draft, I'll read it, I'll turn it back around, and I will give you some feedback and send it right back out to you. I will say this though too: if you're all of y'all should be finished with your coursework now, right? Okay. So if you're finished with your coursework, then I'll do it. If you're still in a course, it may be your advisor who needs to look at it, but I will look at everybody's. If you want me to look at yours, like I said, send it to me. I'll read it. I'll turn it back around. Give me a little bit of time. In other words, for example, don't send it to me on the 21st and ask me to turn it around in 30 minutes and give it back to you. Give me give me a few days. Give me if you're gonna ask me to do it, send it to me by the 10th, and I'll read it and turn it right around to you. Usually I can read it and sit down and turn it right back to you probably within an hour of getting it. But just like I said, if you put me up there on the 21st of September and it's due the 22nd, that's like teaching a pig how to dance. What's it going to do? Irritate you and annoy the pig, So, so we're not going to do that. So like I said, give me a little wiggle room on that, and I will definitely help y'all out. Real quick, let me ask you a question. When we do the October 10th for test 2 and 3, want you to be thinking, like I said, I'm not asking you to do any writing down, but I want you to start really thinking about, how you assess people and how you write your lesson plans. Big deal. Big deal for us to think about, big deal for us to work with, okay? So please, 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 do those 2 things. Start thinking about it. I don't necessarily want you to jump into anything until after we've got task 1 done, okay? When I send you back your task 1 with your comments, you make your revisions and upload it, then dig into task 2 and 3, because task 2 and 3 have to be submitted together in October by the 14th, okay? So you're going to have time. You'll have from the 22nd of September to the 14th of October. Now, you can submit your task 1 earlier than the 22nd of September, okay? But let me explain something. It costs $300 to take this thing. And then it costs $75 every time you got to retake a section. Okay, so if you have to retake 4 sections, that's $600. I don't know about you, but the last place I want to spend $600 is giving it to somebody to do a test. Okay, just please, please. If you got questions, call me. If you got questions you need to bring up and you need some help with, call me. Everybody here should have my number when you get my email, and you should have my number, and otherwise you got my email address, and I will drop what I'm doing and try to help you out. Okay, all right. Now remember, like I said, you guys brought us to the dance. We're not leaving the dance without you. Okay, we're gonna get this done. All right. Other part of it is this: we're going to get through this. We're going, my goal is for you all to make it through and not have to worry about this thing after this fall. Okay. So like I said, let's focus up. Let's be thorough. But let's remember to do a few things. Eat, get some sleep, and take some downtime when you need to take some downtime, okay? Because I don't want y'all sick, okay? Y'all are too valuable to the organization to get sick, okay? So take care of yourselves, all right? Wash your hands, wear your mask, act like your mama told you to, okay? All right. Y'all have a good weekend. Take care.
Hey, Paul,
Yes.
can I call you in just a minute?
I tell you what, why don't you call me about noon, because I've got to follow up on something real quick after I get done.
I do it on my break because I'm headed to work in a few minutes.
Okay, not a problem. Not a problem at all.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Y'all have a good night or a good day. Excuse me.
Thank you.
See ya.